I'm here at Kanyusi High School, 30 miles south of Inverness, where last month it was announced that the world's first ever Shinty school was to open at the beginning of the new season in January. Shinty has long since occupied a vital part of Highland life, with local rivalries running deep, and here in Kanyusi they look forward to their derby with neighbouring town Newton Moor. While researching the history of Kanyusi prior to my visit, I came across the tragic story of the Kanyusi Shinty team at the start of the 20th century, all of whom were lost in the First World War. Barely 100 yards away from the high school is the memorial for all those who gave their lives in battle. However, in the 1920s, the town came together as a community to attempt to rebuild Kanyusi Shinty Club. Over time, the team was built up from the ground and went on to be the dominant force in the world of Shinty. I decided to spend 2 days in Kanyusi to find out more about the school of Shinty and the sport in general. Once I had finished familiarising myself with the town, I headed into the school to see if there were any staff or pupils who I could talk to about the ins and outs of the Shinty school. I had a chat with English teacher Ian McIntosh, who is involved with everything Shinty around the school. He spoke to me about the physical nature of the sport.
I think in this area, if you've learned the skills involved, then people realise that, yeah, it's a physical contact sport, but once you've learned the skills, the blocking, the movement, the awareness, and the use of your stick and the use of your helmet, then it's relatively safe and you know exactly what you're doing, and that's one of the things that hopefully the increased training and the extra skills that they learn being involved in the school of Shinty will kind of promote more confidence. And you do get shy quiet ones who are a little bit unsure, especially when they're quite young, and maybe also to an extent some girls who are a bit unsure about the physical nature of it. The more they practice, the more they get used to it, the more they will be comfortable and confident, and I think that'll be true of parents as well.
When I was exploring the school, I came across someone who was also visiting for the day. After talking to him briefly, it became apparent that we had a common interest.
I'm here today to meet a couple of the teachers in relation to what we could do together around Shinty. The Highland Folk Museum has superb collections of Shinty artefacts, photographs, archive material, plus a lot of sort of material culture, sticks and balls and old jerseys and trophies and all that sort of stuff. Probably the best sort of collection of historical artefacts relating to the game in the country.
After agreeing to come back tomorrow to find out more, I said goodbye to Mr. Worthy and the rest at Kanyusi High School. They had been more than happy to talk to me about the school's progress and treated me not as an outsider, but as one of their own. Mr. McIntosh had arranged that tomorrow I speak to the head of the PE department and even a couple of Shinty mad pupils. I made the journey back to Edinburgh, but I was still eager to find out as much as I could about the sport to get a clearer understanding of what makes this Shinty school so important. I had been in frequent contact with Shinty historian and BBC Alba commentator Hugh-Dan McLennan, who had agreed to meet me in the National Library of Edinburgh this evening. We spoke about the potential impact of the Shinty school on the pupils and on the sport as a whole, and what he thought might happen to the sport in years to come.
One of Shinty's biggest difficulties historically has always been the fact that it's never been part of the core curriculum. Schools don't have to teach Shinty, not even in the Shinty playing areas. It's all usually reliant on a PE teacher who happens to be a Shinty player as a rule, because they're never taught as part of their training how to teach Shinty. That makes a lot of them quite understandably reluctant for all sorts of reasons, good reasons, to take part in the game. But getting it on the curriculum means that there is an obligation on local authorities and on schools to make sure that the people in the schools are trained properly to deliver it. So once we get to the system, if these pilot projects, amongst which Kanyusi is one, if they grow and if they're successful, there is a chance we could roll it out in more areas, and that would then be able, the clubs would be able to draw more on their pupils in the school. At the moment, clubs have to go in, and if they don't go in, there are difficulties of retaining the interest, but also there are difficulties about insurance and all these complications. So it has to be on the curriculum, and PE teachers particularly have to be trained in delivering Shinty. Otherwise, we'll never really make progress at that level. It's very difficult to say what's going to happen to Shinty in the Central Belt. There's a massive amount of development work being done amongst young people, particularly primary age pupils. The difficulty is retaining their interest in Shinty when they come to be teenagers, but that's not a Shinty problem, it's a problem in every single sport. And I think the biggest difficulty we've got in the Central Belt is just finding enough good pitches. There is no area, for example, now in Glasgow where you can have a Camanachd Cup final properly, which we used to do for a long time. Edinburgh doesn't have a real Shinty pitch anymore now that the university doesn't have one. So maybe the answer is to convince universities and schools to build pitches, because when they're building brand new schools at the moment, they don't include a Shinty pitch, not even in the Highlands. So it's a big issue. Unless you have proper pitches, where are you going to play? People will lose interest if you haven't got the facilities, and I think that's the key to it. If you can get the facilities right, the rest of it will flow from there.
I now knew more about the sport in general, but wanted to find out about what effect the school might have on the kids. So I met with a former pupil of the high school who was now a fellow student with me at Edinburgh Napier University. He told me how Shinty had benefited him personally.
When I was at the Shinty school, it's obviously brought me and my friends together, because all my best friends play Shinty as well, and I think people who are starting Shinty just now will have the exact same experience, because they'll definitely meet new people and make new friendships, and then even from different clubs they'll meet tons of people.
Approaching Canusie the next day, I was apprehensive. I was told upon my initial arrival that to truly appreciate Shinty as a sport, I would have to participate in it myself. And although I was no expert, I'd heard Shinty wasn't for the faint-hearted. Luckily there was no contact involved in my first ever Shinty experience, simply a few basic passing routines. But as anticipated, I was still not what you would call a natural. I was blown away by watching Brodie and Richie control and then hit the ball tens of yards to each other with apparent ease. Unlike some sports, this was evidently not something you could just pick up straight away. And unfortunately, I seem to be a perfect example of this. I asked the boys to explain to me the basic rules of Shinty. They told me that it was a 12-a-side sport with two 45-minute halves of play, and that 1 point is awarded for each goal. To me it seemed to resemble hockey, other than the rule that the ball can be played at head height. When I asked the boys if they agreed about the similarity, they replied, yes, if hockey had no rules. Feeling I was perhaps better used to everyone by talking about the sport as opposed to playing it, I retreated inside to have a chat with Brodie and Richie's PE teacher, Mr. Mackay. I found out that he is to be a key part of the team that will implement Shinty in the new year.
The question of what's the purpose of the School of Shinty, and it's a good question, and I've asked that question in the initial meetings before we set it up myself, and I think the answer would be that it's like a two-strand thing. If there's 20 pupils within the group, that perhaps 10 are using it as a chance to improve their performance to the next level. Sort of elite performers using it as a chance to understand the psychology of sport, the nutrition of sport, and that's what they're hoping to get out of it. Whereas the other 10 in the group, that might be the 10 that we're trying to get hooked back into Shinty, who have maybe not played it in a couple of years. So within a group we can differentiate what everyone's trying to get out of it, but that group will be moving sort of forward as a cohort, but with two different purposes within it.
And with that, I made my way out to Canusie High School for the last time. Whilst my time in Canusie has come to an end, it's just the beginning for the kids going through this Shinty school. Its opening will protect the sport's future for years to come, whilst also making sure it is a vital part of Highland life and keeping up this town's long-lasting tradition. I had been moved by the kids' passion for the sport and their enthusiasm to teach me how to play. I'd shared the anticipation of everyone around me for the opening of the Shinty school, and I had been given hope from the dedication of the teachers that the school can influence Shinty for the better.
you.